The way they're trying to mask the crop losses, I really believe that they're trying to mitigate a global panic at the moment. We're going to grow only 30% of what we grow now in 2028. It is truly going to be a reset of society. The reset button has already been pushed. This is a massive amount of food crop losses we're going to be seeing across the planet. And every year from this point forward, it's going to get worse and heavier losses and more expensive food prices. This is going to be the biggest thing that has happened to our planet in 400 years in terms of economy and reset and society and the way we function with each other. Now, how would you control that?
Hey friends, Sean from SGT Report. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks for returning. Thanks for finding us on YouTube because they're making it almost impossible to do so. So a shout out to my patrons and a very special thank you also to one of this channel's sponsors, Virtual Shield. You know, if you're not using a VPN by now on your desktop, tablet, or mobile device when you browse the internet, you're really exposing yourself to danger, guys. At some point, you have to get a VPN. But what is a VPN? It's a virtual private network that allows you to create a secure connection to another network over the internet. Check it out. I'll show you how this works. You can see me here on my website, thelibertymill.com. I've already installed Virtual Shield. I just go up to this little icon, the shield up there in the upper right-hand corner. I click it, and then I connect to Virtual Shield. And now you can see that my IP address says that it's coming from Chicago, Illinois. Virtual Shield has changed my IP address to one coming out of Illinois. I don't live anywhere near Illinois. So that's how a VPN works. Very simple to do. Go to virtualshield.com and download the free 30-day trial and install it. Then just click connect like I just showed you. This month, Virtual Shield is offering a 4th of July celebration special of 20% off all VPN plans and all premium add-ons and VIP performance plans for as low as $3 a month. So sign up for your free 30-day trial. Protect your personal data now with a VPN. Try Virtual Shield. I'll leave the link below this video. Boy, I'll tell you what, guys, until this Department of Justice antitrust investigation is over with Google, I don't think we're going to see things get much better. But we ought to see something happen prior to the 2020 election, or these big social media giants are just going to rig it for the Democrats and rig it against President Trump, unfortunately. Guys, I have a very important call here today. I have David Dubine on the line. His YouTube channel is Adapt 2030, and he's doing incredibly important work. Did you guys know that the world may have hit peak food production last year? We're seeing massive losses of corn in China, David tells me, due to the armyworm and flooding. And as all of you know by now, farmers in the grain belt of the United States have been absolutely devastated by nearly unprecedented spring into summer flooding. That means way fewer crops. Guys, it's my pleasure to welcome David back to the show right now. David, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me back. It's been almost exactly a year since our last interview, and so many things have occurred between then, what was predicted or what was talked about, the signs to look for in the intensifying grand solar minimum, to now what we're seeing actually manifest in front of our eyes. It's unbelievable, these changes that we're seeing. And it all has to do, everything you're seeing out there is smoke and mirrors. It's a distraction for the coming food price rises. So everything intertwined, they have to get you to look a different direction. So almost all the saber rattling, political content and everything that's a distractive factor that we see out there, I really believe has some, at least, edge on it because of the rising food prices and the masking of what's going on right now. They need everybody distracted because if your food prices double and triple, that's going to affect the greater economy. You're going to stop spending on X, Y, or Z just so you can eat every day. I mean, the contractions we saw in 2008, 9, and 10 are nothing because we need to eat every day. See, that's the whole thing I wanted to talk about on tonight's discussion is, if your food doubles and triples, how's that going to ripple through the economy? And what if it's a multi-decade event, not just a year or two long event? How is that really going to twist our world? And then how would media react? How would government react? And that's kind of why we're here having this conversation.
Yeah, and one of the things I want to point out to folks is that David's channel, I mentioned it already, is Adapt 2030. Guys, why would he pick that date? Well, UN Agenda 2030 comes to mind. You know, they want to make us all serfs. They want to reduce our first world living standards to that of the third world, so everybody's on a level playing field. You know, the whole thing was they wanted to talk about equality on this planet, the globalists. They want equality. That means they want to make you as poor as the poorest in the world. They don't want to lift the third world up to first world standards. And boy, are we in a multifaceted pincher attack at this point, guys, because with peak food production probably in at this point. I'm seeing news today, David, that President Trump is saying the U.S. should join the great currency manipulation game by devaluing the dollar. So let's get this straight. If this government starts to purposefully devalue the dollar to compete with all the other nations that are devaluing their currencies, as food production costs are rising and food production yields are falling, we're going to be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, and you look at it, you hit that on the head. The only thing central banks really can't control is the price of food. They can't print more food. See, this is where the end game result is. Checkmate. When we come into the food prices doubling and tripling, what is considered perceived control of all the markets that are being rigged and have been, as you see across the planet, the only thing they can't really rig is food, because you need it to eat every day. There's a real physical supply behind that. And if that supply chain or that yield amount or that amount in storage is reduced to the point where now there's higher bidders coming in on a devalued currency, it's going to be prevalent in the food price rises across the planet so much that it's not going to affect anybody, because everybody eats every day. See, that's the thing. We don't all go buy fuel every day. If you want to bring it down to the poorest part of the world, not everybody drives a car. You are so lucky to be born in a country where everybody has cars. I've traveled this planet, and you know, if you were even born in the United States, you won the lottery. You're in the top 20% of the standard of world's living. So the way we judge with our glasses of what is, you know, poor and rich is completely beyond your recognition of what real poor is. Real poor people across the planet don't buy fuel every day, but they do eat every day. See, that's a huge difference in what our consumption would be on what the most important necessities are daily. Fuel isn't one of them for a predominant amount of this population on the planet.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know that a great majority of the world lives on a couple dollars a day or less. I think that's lost on most Americans, especially people like Alexandria Cortez and Nancy Pelosi and these demonic Democrats that want to socialize this nation and bring us down literally by opening up the borders to the world. All right, that's an aside. We can talk about that if you'd like. I do want to make one bit of housekeeping notes here. Guys, David has a new book out. It was released just a few days ago. It's called The Climate Revolution, and it's a book about how to adapt and thrive during these tumultuous times. I'm going to put the link for that book below this interview. David, tell us a little bit about it. Are you providing people some of the tools that they're going to need to be able to survive what's coming, or are you just breaking down the information so people can grasp how dire the situation has the potential of becoming?
Both, actually, because it's a fully interactive digital copy. So everything's hyperlinked inside there. When we talk about, it's split into two parts. The first part explains how the sun drives the climate on the earth. It's not CO2, it's not you, it is definitely the sun in cyclical patterns on 400 years, or coupling into more powerful cycles on 2,000 year, which we think we're entering into a 2,000-year climate cycle. That explains the science. There's 250 hyperlinks inside there. So if you don't believe what's written in the paragraph, you hyperlink out, and we have reports and different websites over. If you want to go, we have some NASA things inside there, but mainly it's all peer-reviewed research that has been out to universities that we click and link to. In the preparation and the preparing section, everything's about growing your own food, setting up your own greenhouses, getting more self-sufficient with water filtration and everything you would need. So if you don't know how to build a greenhouse or even a jalapeno or even start the very most basic thing on Grow Guides and how we have hyperlinks. So you click out the 20 easiest vegetables to grow. It takes you to a site with Grow Guides. If you want to learn how to grow, we put all the engineering diagrams in there. Click, link out to that. It goes right to PDFs with all the engineering diagrams so you can build your own greenhouses. We're trying to couple mushroom production from the outgassing of CO2 from mushroom production into traditional greenhouses so you can boost the yield of green leafy vegetables inside a greenhouse. You know, how to build these structures on hills, and we're going the whole 9 yards. Literally, we went out and over 250 links. It took us 4 months to get that book together, and it's not that long. 2 people working on it, finding all the links, but it is about you. You have to understand the cycles, and if you understand the cycles, see, this is the thing. You can look back in history and see where it happened before in the Maunder minimum in the 1600s. We can go back in the Wolf minimum, the Sporer minimum, go back in the 1200s and see what happened. And then if you have a history book, you can see how society was affected. And we always found these same 3 things that keep reoccurring again, every grand solar minimum: population migration, economic declines, and food price rises, and yield declines. They're all coupled there. But if your growing conditions are not good, people move. And what you talked about immigration, I'd love to talk about that too. I have a fully different take on it. as to food production, grow zones that are emerging across the planet where they need to get what would be resistance out of there. So they're allowing them through migration to get out so they can take over the new forming grow zones in Northern Africa and different places like this. But that might be too taboo. You know, YouTube might not want us to talk about that, and they'll definitely censor this video.
Yeah, YouTube doesn't want truth spoken. That is absolutely for sure. If you have an alternative viewpoint to anything coming out of the Mockingbird mainstream horror media, David, as you know, you'll surely be demonetized, if not shadow banned or kicked off of YouTube entirely. But we're going to keep speaking the truth because it's what gets us up in the morning. And frankly, for me personally, it's what gives my life value. I'm sick and tired. I don't know how, David. I've said this so many times. I don't know how, and I think I do know how. I think they've sold their souls to a lower power. But I don't know how these people sleep at night. The ones that get paid $12 million a year, like Anderson Cooper at CNN, to lie to the American people. The whole crew over at MSNBC, the people at Washington Post, the people at the New York Times, not all of them, but many of them. Wolf Blitzer, the list goes on. Jake Tapper, whose wife Jennifer Tapper told the Washingtonian a full year and a half before anyone heard the word Pizzagate that their favorite family restaurant was Comet Ping Pong. You just can't make that up, David. These people, I think President Trump is right. These people are the enemies of the people. All right, let's do this. Let's just rewind to March 20th, 2019, because it's so easy for this stuff to go down the memory hole, especially if you're living on one of the coasts or in the South, you're in Florida, you're in Texas, you're in LA, you're in New York. It may be lost on you what happened this spring to farmers. This from Reuters. U.S. farmers face devastation following Midwest floods. Here's the first two paragraphs. Midwestern farmers have been gambling they could ride out the U.S.-China trade war by storing their corn and soybeans anywhere they could, in bins, plastic tubes, in barns, or even outside. Now, the unthinkable has happened. Record floods have devastated a wide swath of the farm belt across Iowa, Nebraska, South Dakota, and several other states. Early estimates of lost crops and livestock approach $1 billion in Nebraska alone. With more flooding expected, damages are expected to climb much, much higher for the region. David, what does this mean for the reality of those of us who go to the grocery stores to buy bread, to buy pork, to buy beef, to buy all of the staples we need to survive and feed our families? Are we going to see prices begin to rise in any sort of real measurable terms?
Yes, and you already are. If you're paying even half attention while you go into a store, I mean, you've noticed all of your food prices have risen far faster than the theft of 2% out of your spending through what they call inflation. It's rising far faster than that. So why is nobody asking questions? Why is our food pricing rising 8, 10, 2% a month, 12%? Why is it going up so fast? But oh, I forgot they don't put that in the calculations when they're when they're doing the inflation figures. Sorry, we don't have to count food. Why not? But I want to go back to the farmer here. This is where, and also when you said you cannot trust some of these people, and the enemies of the people are now the United States Department of Agriculture, the USDA. And myself, if I could be bold on your program here, I call for the full resignation of Warren P. Preston, the Secretary of Agriculture, and Joseph L. Parsons, the Agriculture Statistics Board chairperson. This report that was just released on the 28th had to go across both of their desks. Now, this report, what you mentioned with the flooding, you have to put this into context. It was the largest flooding ever recorded in the United States, period, hands down. Even the biggest floods we ever had back in the 1930s and coming up here in 1993, the amount of river gauges that went to all-time flood stages between those two most massive floods that we've ever had across the grow zones. You got to go back in the 1920s, and then we would come up that 1993 and 94 damage. So we had two of the most maximum floods that were ever recorded in the States. You can even couple those two events, 93 and back in the 1920s there. This new set of floods you're talking about surpassed all of that and broke 40, 50 due flood records set on river gauges, not by inches, but multiple feet above that, levees breaking, areas that had never been flooded before. Like you're talking about a washed away field. The dams that weren't even over top, they were actually literally washed away. And when you talk about a dam being washed away because of a tsunami flash flood that then collapses interstate bridges further down the stream on a 2-mile wide tsunami, something's wrong there. And the amount of damage, just even if these Secretary of Agriculture would have looked through social media, Twitter feeds, Facebook feeds, what you're reading right there with the regular mainstream media. You would have noticed there was an immense damage to the fields this year, and the yields are nowhere near, they're not going to be anywhere near the 166 or 172 bushels per acre that they're looking for. And the amount of planted acres, I did my own research on it because I've been following it since these very floods you talked about. We are going below the 1938 planting totals. Below 1938. Now, this is on record, and they've also been claiming government crop insurance for what they call prevent plant. So if you're a farmer and you can't get the crops in the ground because it's too wet, too dry, or something's happened ecologically where you can't get your crops in, the government will pay you insurance for that. Well, you have to claim on the insurance. So there's been a lot of farmers already putting in claims. Now, how could the USDA know not that we weren't going to? They were saying it's going to increase corn production 2% this year. That is absolutely criminal for them to say such a thing. And then it affected the markets. Now, the secretary, Warren P. Preston and Joseph Parsons, shame on you, you criminals, what you did with this crop report. This affects us with our food prices. This affects us out on the stock market, and the CFTC, you better investigate who had information on this that put those trades in to go the opposite direction on beans and the opposite direction on corn and walked away with billions off this crop report. You talk about dirtiness in-house there. You need to just add right in with the USDA. Criminals. And it went past both of your desks, and you didn't sign off and even say, hey, we need to pull back and take a look and see what the real numbers were. That's what happened. And it's the lowest planting ever since 1938, yet this report from the USDA said it's going to increase 2%. There's something very wrong. They're trying to hide, I think they're trying to hide the food price increases that are swiftly coming, because if you think about globally, China and the United States are the two largest corn producers. Now, China's losing at a minimum 30% of its corn production due to the flooding and the armyworm, which is unchecked. Then we have the United States losing, it's going to go down below 58 million acres planted. So we're looking at a good, 30% cut at the minimum off of U.S. corn production. They even reduced the amount that was in the carryover stocks due to, what was stored, what you talked about in the beginning of my rant here, with all the grains in the bins and the silos, a lot of that was washed away. So they already cut the carryover stocks 50% from a little over 2 billion down to 1.1 billion already. That much got washed away. And now they're talking about this planting here that's supposed to increase to 2%. Something's very wrong. They're trying to mask the food price rises. I think they're trying to mitigate the panic. And Sean, I'll leave it there.
It is alarming. You're right. A lot of these stockpiles of grain and corn, et cetera, had been washed away. These farmers are facing financial ruin here in this nation. And really, people aren't reporting on it. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you, because we do need to level set and remember what happened just this spring. The floods were nearly unprecedented. I want to say a couple of things. You mentioned the CFTC. Good luck with them actually doing any regulation or doing any reining in of the criminality we see, because those of us that have been into precious metals for so long, David, as you well know, there's nothing that the bankers can't manipulate in terms of gold and silver prices, at least, that the CFTC doesn't happily look the other way to avoid seeing. So not sure we're going to get any justice there. And I wanted to ask you this about the USDA. You rightly criticized them for their corn report, but I want to ask you this. I sort of tongue-in-cheek asked you if we were going to see prices rise. Obviously, we are. That's part of this conversation. It's part of your thesis, and we're providing the quantifiables that help people understand how food prices will rise. And you know who's really going to feel the pinch, David? These private restaurant owners. You got Chipotle on one hand, that's a corporation, but how about your local mom and pop restaurant? The food away from home restaurant prices were up 2.9% in May 2019 over May 2018, a 3% increase. So I think that's where people are really going to start to see real price inflation, because these people that have to pay their leases and their employees and their taxes and their food, their costs to carry food, that's where you're really going to see the prices rise first, I think, is in the restaurants. But according to the USDA, we're only seeing supermarket food prices rise 1.2% higher. But still, that's 1.2% higher than it was just a year ago. It just begs the question, I wonder what the real numbers are.
Well, the figures I was working out here, basing on the amount of acreage lost that won't be planted, I even called over to the USDA and the Farm Services Association, the FSA, and they're the ones who do the prevent plant. I was asking them, what kind of acreage numbers do you have? And they won't let that out, but farmers have started to file claims. That's how I knew that, because I actually talked to some people at the USDA. Quite nice. I was unable to get a hold of the secretary up there, wouldn't take my call. But I'm predicting $7.35 corn, and that's our very conservative estimate based on the losses, since it is more than the 1938 losses. If you go back into the 1993 floods and the 2011 floods, and then you can look at what happened just directly after, with the farm fields not being put back into service the following year, the way that markets back then could have been, or I am saying were manipulated to try to suppress prices. And you'll see the double spike coming up. So we're looking at 735 corn coming, and right now it's around 420. So if your food prices, this is a basic constituent ingredient for almost everything produced. You know, it could be used for feed, great. I already have word that they're going to be putting mandates on ethanol producers to shutter production because they won't be able to provide the amount of corn. The carryover stocks were cut in half due to what was wiped away in the floods. So they took the carryover stocks from around 2.3 billion bushels right down to 1.1 billion bushels. That's shaved off, and that's now official figures. And what's coming out of the fields literally is not going to be enough to even support humans and factory production and exports. They're going to have to cut something. So they decided to cut ethanol production first. So they're going to be shuttering these plants. They're putting in, and watch this, Trump or somebody along the way is going to put in new legislation to shut down. They're just not going to have, they're going to have to ration corn into the ethanol producers. That's the level we're at. And for the USDA to come out literally and say, wait a second, we're going to rise 2% when they had all this other information there. The only way I can see it is now governments are involved to try to mask the food price rises to stave off a global panic, because when people freak out and they understand that their food prices are going to rise indefinitely, they're going to run to the stores and they're just going to start buying an enormous amount of stuff. This is going to have, push and pull on the supply chain, not going to be as much money in the bank. And this is what I really believe is they're trying to stave off the panic. They don't care about you dying of food or starving to death. They don't care about that. What the people in control currently care about is keeping the paradigm intact and keeping this fractional reserve system floating as long as they can. Because if you start to know what I know and what we put in the book and what's out in the real public, if you see the food figures coming out of China and the United States, and Australia is now a wheat importer. They used to be wheat exporters, but now they're wheat importing. Look at it on the record. Australia became a net wheat importer this year. South Africa is completely offline due to politics. You take a look around different parts of the world, what's happening, everybody grabbing different zones of the planet. It's all about food. Your spending habits are going to shift. You're going to start pulling money out of the bank to get ready for what you see in the future. If you don't have those reserve savings, if you're not pumping money in your 401k, if you're drawing money out of your bank account, your savings, you're selling your stocks to get ready for this, that's all pulling out of the fractional reserve system. They don't want that because they can't loan out and I don't even know what's the overage rate. It's 20 to 1 now, what they can loan out versus what they have in. But that's at jeopardy. That's truly what's at jeopardy. So this every news article you see now, everything's fine. It's going to get better next year. There's this overdrive of stability articles out there right now when you should be looking behind you in the rearview mirror, because what's really back there is going to shake this planet. It's going to rip the threads of our society apart coming within a year or two maximum. So you talk about dollar devaluation. Now we got rising food prices and nobody's being warned. That's the whole thing. I can't get it. Why are they not talking about these problems that are so very apparent, that are happening? They're in play right now, but nobody wants to talk about it. All they want to do is keep you distracted. And I don't get it. I bang my head against the wall trying to figure it out. Why do they keep everybody distracted? I just don't know. I don't have an answer. Food prices up by the end of the year. Yes, for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, maybe you do have the answer, and it might be a little conspiratorial. Now, some of the things that you said in your email to me when we were sort of setting up this conversation resonated with me, and it sparked a thought. Our friends over at Trade Genius, I get these Trade Genius alerts for stock buys on my phone. Trade Genius just issued this video a couple days ago titled "The Coming Chinese Pork Famine." So I think they kind of know what you know. They're following some of the same data you're following, because you wrote in part in this email to me that we have the massive losses of corn in China due to the armyworm and flooding, obviously massive losses in the United States due to flooding, the swine flu wiping out the main soy import usage from the U.S., all at the time we as a country will have difficulty keeping up exports as ethanol will be shuttered later in the year due to the all-encompassing losses. You wrote, too coincidental, because now China magically shifts away from the U.S. at this exact time. Talk about a coordinated plan not to spook the markets and masses. I don't know, man. Maybe it's the opposite. It should be spooking the markets and the masses that China is shifting away from the U.S. dollar, that Russia is shifting away, the whole world's shifting away. And I guess all we have left to enforce the dollar and the usage of the dollar is the barrel of the gun, the military. I mean, these are scary times if you're awake and you're really looking at the data. I mean, God bless President Trump to the degree that he's not the witch in the White House that would have destroyed this country by now. We'd probably be in World War III. But I'm not sure that one man in the White House can save us when these Democrats are all aligned with the globalists that want to destroy this country, open the borders, and roll in Agenda 2030. David?
Yeah, and you forgot Mexico positioning as well, because what they started to do was buy Argentinian corn, and they shifted away from the U.S. You know, right at that time when Trump was saying, hey, we're going to put tariffs on you if you allow the refugees across the border, they magically switched over to Argentinian corn and Brazilian corn magically at the exact same time. So think about it. Now, you have to understand, from at least my perspective, that all global governments are aware of this grand solar minimum and the massive, massive societal changes coming. It is truly going to be a reset of society. The reset button has already been pushed. If these are the massive losses we're getting in the first year for food production, I really am actually, my heart beats and I get a little nervous thinking about what's coming in significant dates for those of you out there. 2021, 2023, and 2028. Each one a more gargantuan step down in losses globally of what we can produce food-wise for this planet. Now, if you're a set of global governments that all understands this is on our doorstep, that what we're going to have to repeat something in history again here, how would you try to control it? That's what you need to ask yourself. And, you know, the food is the main thing. You can almost look at a country's economy based on its food production. Because if you don't have enough food to feed the people, you're either going to have to import it or you're going to produce it yourself. And you look across the planet, there's only, I would say less than 7 super powerhouse food producers that have enough to produce to feed their own internal demands, as well as, something like ethanol or animal husbandry production. It could be swine, could be cattle, and then export to other nations who can't produce enough. There's just a handful of those nations on the planet. And right now they're being crushed with food together. As this cycle in a 400-year cycle or a 2,000-year cycle is in a repeat, and the economy is going to crash anyway. It does every grand solar minimum. The population migration and the just population declines due to famines and fighting and whatever else is in there. There's going to be a bunch of ruckus going on anyway. Now, this is in no way controllable. How would you at that point try to transition the society from what we all grew up as, this normal, stable society where we had food every day, the economy was intact, into something where we're going to grow only 30% of what we grow now in 2028. You got to understand out of that. If we had 100 tons now, we're only going to be able to grow 30 tons by 2028. This is a massive amount of food crop losses we're going to be seeing across the planet. And every year from this point forward, it's going to get worse and heavier losses and more expensive food prices. Now, how would you control that?
It's a lot to take in, isn't it? Because we try so hard to see our cup is half full here. And we all know, we've known for a very long time, that we have our backs up against the wall because the elite families that control this planet are not benevolent dictators. They're malevolent dictators. We don't want dictators at all. We just want our Bill of Rights, our sovereignty. We want to be left alone to run our own lives, grow our own food, raise our own kids, chemical-free, right? Vaccine damage-free. And these people will have nothing of it. Richard Pan over there in California introduces SB 277, mandatory injections, mandatory vaccines for kids. Parents can't say no. State-sponsored needle? I can think of nothing more totalitarian and authoritarian than what we've seen occur just in the past few years, David. And now you're sharing all of this information with us, which really ought to make us a bit frightened of what's coming down the pike. But this isn't fear-mongering. Well, I guess we'll leave it there. Is this fear-mongering, or is this hardcore data that people need to grapple with? And if they don't, they choose not to at their own peril.
Well, no, it's not. I'm just pointing out that these cycles recur and they're mappable. And we know another one's here now. We know what's happened in the past. We know what societal changes to expect. And if you're more prepared, that's going to be better for not only myself because you're more prepared, but just for us in general. Because let's say there's 2 people prepared compared to 20 million people that know what's going on and start to transition to get these skill sets, what you're going to need to grow your own food. That is going to be a basic necessity as much as you knowing how to press that button to turn your electricity on your computer to operate email, as we have in this modern day paradigm. Growing your own food is going to break down to that level of understanding of necessity. Everybody's going to do it. Everybody's going to have to know how to do it. I'm not trying to fear it, anything. I'm saying, please wake up, do all your own research. I want you to try to disprove me. And that was another reason we wrote that, was try to disprove what we say. We left you all the links. We left you all the basic information. We left you a million billion breadcrumbs in there. Try to disprove it. We want you to do the research, because that way you can start to come at it and go, wow, I never heard about this. Wow, you might have found a different site that we're not referencing in there. It's about you doing your own research to see, why is there so much control being put over us at this point? Why was that police state unveiled in 9/11? Now the light bulb goes on in my head and says, it was never about terrorism. It was about the point we're reaching right now when they're going to need to control the masses in the entire civilization, because everybody's going to be rioting over food in the cities and really it's going to change drastically just the availability of food or not. And when the first 10% of our bottom of any population, doesn't matter what country you are, XYZ country, when the bottom 10% get priced out of the market, even if they have government assistance, if they cannot eat, they're going to the streets. And it's quickly going to be followed by a fair few people who just support it. But if the food prices rise yet again, that's going to add another 5-6% on top of that. And if you have even 15% of your country out there in food riots daily, you're going to need a police state to control it. Now, how do you unveil a police state without spooking everybody, without having people ask a lot of questions and say, well, why are there more cameras? Why are there militarized police? Why is all this happening? Well, 9/11 makes perfect sense. See, nobody's questioned it until now, but I really firmly believe it has something to do with the future that we have entered and we are entering, getting deeper into from this point forward. If the food prices rise by the end of the year and double, and just corn, think about everything you get from a store that uses any kind of cornstarch, corn syrup, corn preservative, anything inside that has been manufactured from corn is going to spike in price. And a lot of people eat junk food. And people on food assistance, man, they buy a lot of things that aren't so healthy and are a little less priced. Those are going to be the first things that rise in price. So when we get to this whole full loop here, it makes sense why there's a police state. It makes sense why there's so much control on social media. They want to map you out, whether you're going to be a threat, whether you're going to help, what your skill sets are, and they're trying to map you out as an individual. Should we give you food in the future? And you think it's Orwellian and conspiratorial. I want to add one last point, and then I'll quit my rant here. In China, the social credit system.
Right.
Now, they're putting article after article in the Chinese media not to panic, that there's enough food. Now, they know your buying habits because you're already tracked through, the WeChat Pay and, everywhere across your credit card usage and social media and everything. They know everywhere you go, where you live. They know how much food you buy already. Daily, you have an average food consumption purchase habit fingerprint, if you will. If you purchase double or more, and if you buy too much food, they knock down your social credit score now, because they know people are starting to hoard, or not hoard, but get prepared and buy more food. Maybe they go in and buy 10 cans of something where they'd normally buy 2. Well, you just suddenly bought 10 cans, not 2. Now we're going to knock your social credit score down. So all this tracking now makes sense. Police state makes sense. They're getting ready for the food shortages. They're here now. It's going to exacerbate as we move forward. And what we just saw in the United States, if they don't get these fields refurbished next year, it's going to drop down again in production, because some of these weather patterns and jet streams that are locking into place as our magnetosphere is weakening. The cloud cells are moving into different formations, different areas on the planet. We got an enormous amount of volcanic eruptions ejecting ash up 85, 90,000 feet. There were 3 of those just last week. Now, this is all adding into cooling, cloud formation, more rain, and these jet streams are locking these weather patterns into new areas on the planet. So if it's getting wetter, It's forecast for this pattern to lock straight over our grow zones again next year and flood again incredibly during these same seasons. So if we see it again next year, I tell you what, we're going to go into a global famine by 2023. 2028, I don't even know if we're going to get there. That's when Valentina Zarkova and her research said we'll only be growing 30% of the food we grow today, and she called on all governments across the planet to start stockpiling food for the citizens because at 2028 there won't be enough to feed everybody. So you can start to see and draw it all back down the funnel to the beginning drip point, which is the grand solar minimum and the global food reduction, peak food.
Yeah, and I guess this brings us full circle. You know, you mentioned the meltdown of societies when food becomes inaccessible, and we have real-world examples of that right now. People can go and look at, watch the videos on YouTube. They're quite horrifying. We see what's going on in Venezuela. Guys, Argentina is facing 40% inflation this year, 40%. So as we see President Trump say, maybe we should start to embrace the devaluation of the U.S. dollar in a race to the bottom between China and everybody else, this is a slippery slope into the abyss because, again, it's a multifaceted pincher attack, right? The dollar drops in value as food prices are rising. Oh my God, it's a horror show. So you know what, guys, one thing you could do to support this channel, SGT Report, and help yourselves is to go to mypatriotsupply.com and you can save 45% today on 2 weeks of food storage or upgrade to a 4-week food supply. It's the best deal in the business. 16 food varieties with up to 25-year shelf life, ships directly to your door. I'll leave the link below this video, mypatriotfoodsupply.com/SGT report. David, your book, The Climate Revolution. I think that's really important for people to take a look at. I'll leave the link below the video for that too. It's about how to adapt and thrive during these tumultuous times, guys. And David, I think we can both agree that you've just described in this conversation some very tumultuous times ahead.
And I would agree with long-term food storage. I know My Patriot Supply as well. Anything that you can get for long-term food storage, whether you buy it from a company that already has it packed in Mylar bags as such, or you actually buy the Mylar bags yourself and learn how to put the oxygen packs in there, go out to your store, know where the bulk bean section is, learn how to sprout, learn how to take some of those sprouts that you didn't eat and turn them into full-grown plants that can then return the seeds to you. But whatever you do, you need food, and you need food to stay fresh for a longer time. Now, you're going to have to learn how to do that. It's not something you can just drop into in 2 seconds. You're going to have to watch videos, watch books, learn, buy products that are already packed so you can see at least what it looks like when it's packed into a long-term, storage box or packet, so you know at least what it looks like and what you can do and accomplish yourself with a simple vac and a sealer. These are the types of things we talk about in the book that we're going to really need to do for real life here. This is no longer like, thinking about what we're doing. You're going to have to start implementing this right now. And also, you talked about the slippery slope of currency devaluations and currency fiat problems. Well, see, that's one of the things with this grand solar minimum. 100% of these, there's always a currency collapse due to people migrating because they can't physically live in a place anymore. We're so lucky to have power grids now, but you have to think about in the 1600s, the 1200, 800 AD, something like 400 AD. When we go back in time, they didn't have the luxury of power grids. So if it became too brutally cold, you couldn't live there. You'd have to leave. And a perfect example is up in Norway during the Maunder minimum. Thriving communities, coastal, but too much sea ice would come in every year and it blocked off the port deliveries. They couldn't even get their supplies. So they found out in like 1710 when people went back up north again into places, northern Sweden, you get up places in Norway, that the cities had emptied out 90%. So think about that in the debt system. If a city empties out 90%, where's the valuation on anything? There's no way to pay back the debt. That's gone. We're going to have to transition to a new monetary system. Like everything in terms of like the value of debt and holding and what you could do with real estate and bonds and for the future, there will be no future for this. It's all going to reset That's the whole thing. Like, everybody's in on the game except for the average citizen who they're not telling all this is going on. That's why we wrote the book, to try to get everybody to understand the intricacies, the interwovenness of the economy, the rise of cryptocurrency, the rise of the police state, going into these things you can do to get yourself ready for these changes, because they're here now. It's not even getting ready anymore. It's like, you need to implement and execute daily now to stay alive. You're going to have to learn these skills. I kid you not. It's not fear. It is about a real world situation. It's no different than, I live in a hurricane zone. We have the biggest hurricane ever that's been recorded, that's encompassing like a quarter of the planet. The eye of it's going to come right over our city. All right. Now, what would you do and have people to try to get ready? Would that be fear mongering? No, it wouldn't. This is the exact same thing. This is going to be the biggest thing that has happened to our planet in 400 years in terms of economy and reset and society and the way we function with each other and the way we treat each other and how we're going to get along together and work together to try to move through this. We need to adapt daily, weekly, monthly as these changes are in front of us. It's going to be a constant adaptation lifestyle from this point forward, with a bit of pioneering inside there.
Yeah. Yeah. Two words come to mind as I hear you in your passion: red pill. You're not going to get this information from CNN, friends, nor from Bezos' blog over there at the Washington Post. All right, guys, I'm going to put the book link below this video, The Climate Revolution. Click on that. Check it out. I'm also going to put the My Patriot Supply link below. And one last bit of housekeeping. For those of you that want to take a bite out of Google, and for those of you who already have by downloading the Brave browser, thank you. I mean, we got to take the fight to Google. Why use Google Chrome when it spies on you and when Brave doesn't spy on you and it's more than 2 times faster? And you can earn basic attention tokens, credits for using Brave, which you can pay out as tips to the content providers you like the most. It's an absolute win-win. So download the Brave browser for those who already have and didn't successfully install it. Just re-download it. The link is below this video. Install it and use it for 30 days. I promise you, you'll never go back to Chrome. Brave even has a built-in ad blocker, which works automatically, or you can disable it and then get paid even more basic attention token for suffering through a few ads here and there. But it's all about choice, David. All we ask for as Americans is choice. Not our right to choose to abort babies, but our right to choose to live free, unencumbered by the tyranny of big government and big globalists like George Soros. And I agree with just about everything you said here. You've certainly got the data to back up what you've said. And with UN Agenda 2030 coming into view, I think the name of your YouTube channel is quite adept. Guys, that YouTube channel is Adapt 2030. You can also catch mini Ice Age conversations with David Dubine on iTunes and Stitcher. And our guest has been David Dubine. David, thanks so much.
And if I could just wrap off with one single thought in 30 seconds or less. It's really quirky how Facebook just comes out with its new token to get the masses to start to think about adopting cryptocurrency, to understand what cryptocurrency around for how long, almost a decade, and suddenly this year is when they roll it out. This is the same year that the transition is starting, with all of the currencies and the fiat's going to start to fail because of rising food prices that are uncontrollable.
Yeah, that's right.
They need a Facebook. They need a Facebook for the full global adoption start point. It's here now. If you can't see all the signs matching up, I'm sorry you're not looking, and thanks for listening. Hope you got something out of our conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. You're talking about Libra coin, which I can think of no bigger affront to anyone who cares about freedom and liberty than a cryptocurrency introduced by a company that openly spies on you and sells your data. It's just disgusting, but that's what we're up against. New World Order people like Zuckerberg and Bezos at Amazon, and Bill Gates, the eugenicist over there, former Microsoft CEO, whose father was the head of Planned Parenthood. Guys, you just can't make this stuff up. Again, if we had benevolent dictators as opposed to the malevolent ones, this world could be an Eden. But that's not what they want. They want to defile creation, and they want to put an end to Eden. They want to put an end to all of us. Boy, sorry to get so dark, but I think that's the fact. Red pill, baby, red pill. This has definitely been a red pill conversation with David Dubine. David, thanks, man.
Talk to you next time.
All right, guys, and thank you so much for tuning in. You know how much we appreciate it. All the links I mentioned will be in the more information section below this video. A thanks to my patrons who are keeping us in the fight as YouTube and Google literally try to strangle us and silence us and prevent anyone from finding us. Thanks so much to my patrons, and thanks so much to all of you. If this information resonated with you, please do share it. Share the link to this video within your sphere of influence on social media. We can all help wake up others. I've always said you can't wake up others. They have to choose to wake up on their own, but certainly this information can help nudge people in the right direction. And guys, for Real News 24/7, visit us at sgtreport.com, the antidote to corporate propaganda. God bless y'all. Bye-bye.
I think that's part of the problem we have as just a society. We're all being pulled in so many different directions that we have to rely on these different authority sources who, you know, are supposed to be bringing us the news. And that's what's gotten us into the situation, is that we can't trust those people.